Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. By far the biggest storyline from week one of the college football season. Mike Norvell, Florida State, shocking the college football landscape. Monster win against Alabama. What stands out to me the most as I've rewatched this game a couple of times is that when I was watching this game live on Saturday afternoon, like my mindset was, all right, can Florida State figure out a way to hold on to this win? The more and more I rewatch this game, like Florida State was the better football team for all four quarters. This was not a fluke win where they had a couple of plays go their way. They were the better football team for four quarters. I thought they were the better football team along the lines of scrimmage. And you know what's frustrating about how this game is being talked about is I feel like many people are focused on Alabama, Kalen DeBoer on the hot seat, which look, that's a very fair conversation to have. I feel like we're not talking enough about Florida State. You know, what feels different about Florida State? How dangerous can they be in 2025? That seems to be a very important discussion. At least the way I look at things, not only in the ACC, I think they've immediately put themselves back in that top tier of an ACC contender. More importantly, like, well, what can this team do if they play like that every single week? How dangerous then can they be in the postseason? Is another question that we probably should be talking about. I think a lot of Florida State fans, similar to myself, are like, all right, want to see it for a few more weeks before we start having those conversations. But the biggest takeaway is we saw a version of Florida State Saturday afternoon that can bang with anybody in the country. That should fire up a lot of Florida State fans. Now, I want to get into some of the things that I learned the most during the rewatch of this game. That was so fun about Florida State all off season long. We weren't really sure what to expect. Brand new coaching staff, brand new roster. What was this team going to be? I feel like we figured out a lot about this football team over the last couple of days. Fired up to get into some of my biggest takeaways before we get into it. As always, the Florida State fans, appreciate you guys in it. It was really cool to watch this team get it done against Alabama. It was really cool to talk about it after as well. Many of the Florida State fans have been rocking with the boys for a very long time, and there's been some highs and lows for this program. The amount of support the Florida State fans have shown the boys really over the last couple of years during those highs and lows been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, I would love to hear some of your biggest takeaways as well. Who are the players that pop to you guys as well? Because I know dang sure if y'all taking time out of your Tuesday morning to listen to me, I know damn well that y'all went and rewatched this game a couple of times as well. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start with this. Both coordinators were massive hits. And I always had felt like this was a under the radar storyline for Florida State is that you talk so much about the personnel. Tommy Castellanos at quarterback, Deuce Robinson at wide receiver. These coordinator hires, they were going to be important because you go back to Florida State last year and say, yes, the personnel you missed on a lot of transfer portal additions. The personnel wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be in 2024. The coaching staff was it was a joke. Tony White and Gus Malzahn, they were the in my opinion, I don't think I saw many more impressive coordinator performances of week one than what you saw in Tallahassee from both of these. I want to start with Tony White. The first drive for Alabama, 14 plays, 80 yards, scored a touchdown in like 7-minute drive, right? And there were a lot of good things that Florida State defense did that first drive. Really struggled on third downs. Really struggled allowing Ty Simpson to get outside the pocket, right? And especially James Williams. Like James Williams had a really bad drive where he just wasn't being disciplined enough with his pass rush lanes. That was not a problem almost the rest of the game for Florida State. So what does that tell me is, yeah, it was disappointing to give up a touchdown on the first drive for Alabama. The problems that you saw within the defense, the things that allowed Alabama to stay on the field on third down. They allowed them to score a touchdown that first drive. They got fixed immediately. It wasn't a problem. Like those kind of small in-game adjustments, they were elite by Tony White. I mean, talk about taking away one of the best players in all of college football and Ryan Williams. You saw Tony White do that as well. Here's the other thing. I thought that the safety and linebacker play, two positions where it's not like Florida State went to the portal and got brand new football players, but they certainly look like it. Like that's telling me that player development is taking place at Florida State when it really hasn't over the last couple of years. I look at Earl Little and say that's a brand new football player that we saw Saturday afternoon. Thought Justin Cryer played well. Thought Blake Nicholson played well. I mean, I'm looking at it and saying, hey, the guys are getting better, which is what you want to see, number one, from your coaching staff, and you want to see elite in-game adjustments. Thought Florida State had both on Saturday afternoon. Then you go to Gus Malzahn on the offense side of the football and say it's going to be a unique offense, right? But it has the opportunity to be good if Gus Malzahn leans into the talent that he has. Well, gosh darn it, I thought he did, right? I mean, I look at how you used Tommy and used his legs, but also, gave him some really easy throws. And when Tommy had the throws to make, Tommy was making those throws elite pre-snap motion here, especially with that jet sweep stuff to guys like Jalen Lucas, Mekhi Danzy. The conversation here is you have a lot of players that can do specific things well. Can you make sure you put those players in those kind of opportunities? Like get Mekhi Danzy the ball in space, normally good things happen. Same thing for Jalen Lucas. Well, that's what we were doing, and it worked really, really well. I was really impressed with both coordinators week one against Alabama. To me, that might be, and that's not to take anything away from the players that were on the football field, because I thought they were whooping tail too. These coordinators are legit for Florida State coming out of week one. Here's the other thing, and these are two like broad conversations before we get a little nitty gritty and talk about some players that I thought really popped. I looked at it and said, we did the small things right. And it started with just effort. Like, you go just watch that game. You don't have to rewatch every play, and it doesn't have to be like a film session. Just go watch that game again. Like, what team was playing faster? What team was playing more physical? What team was playing with more effort? You couldn't say that one time for Florida State in 2024. Now, not one time did Florida State or was Florida State the program that was playing the hardest. Saturday afternoon, it wasn't even close. The effort level from every single player on Florida State, both sides of the football. Like, I'm talking about these safeties firing downhill and fitting the run. I'm talking about the physicality of which they played with. I'm talking about the wide receivers and tight ends, how they were blocking on the perimeter. You just beat up Alabama in all the small things. The thing that fires me up the most is that was the biggest problem for Florida State 12 months ago. That problem has seemingly been fixed within this program. Getting a little bit more nitty gritty, I kind of actually just want to pull up the depth chart and work through it and talk about some players that I thought really popped. Number one, I thought the second and third level defenders were awesome for Florida State. Right. I mean, Earl Little, I don't think it's crazy to say Earl Little was the best football player on the field Saturday afternoon. What he did in coverage, what he did fitting the run. He was the tone setter for the Florida State defense, which, again, I'm going to go back and give Tony White his flowers. It's about unlocking these guys. We knew Earl Little had the juice. Just had to put him in spots to be successful. I thought he was awesome. Ashton Barker, I thought was really good. I thought the safeties fitting the run and in coverage were really good. Hey, want to know why I am really focusing on these second and third level defenders, the linebackers and safeties? Alabama did not have a single carry that went for over 20 yards. Like, what does that tell you? It tells you that we're coming up as safeties and linebackers and we're taking good angles and we're making tackles and fitting the run the right way. Because when you have those big chunk plays, those carries that go for 20 plus yards, that normally means your linebackers and safeties are either one, not fitting the run the right way, number two, missing tackles. We didn't see very much of that at all Saturday afternoon. These safeties, these linebackers, again, most of these guys were on this football team last year, remarkably better than what you saw 12 months ago in 2024. Another really big storyline here against an Alabama offensive line that, look, I think many have Alabama as a top 10 offensive line in the country. This defensive line won in the pass rush with the front four. We knew this was going to be a big storyline because you knew Tony White wanted to allocate bodies in the secondary, like take away the explosive plays that a guy like Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams can come up with, which you did a really good job of doing. You can only have that opportunity if you can get after the quarterback with your front four. If you can't, and you got to start bringing linebackers and safeties on blitzes, then you start playing with fire because then Ryan Williams starting to get some one-on-one matchups. Tony White did not blitz a ton, and he quite frankly did not need to. I'm looking at a guy like James Williams and say, hey, it wasn't perfect from him. He's got to do a much better job staying in his pass rush lane, disruptive. How about the Desir brothers? I mean, the Desir brothers were super present in this football game, whether it was against the run, whether it was getting after the passer. Thought you saw some good things from Jason Jenkins. Thought you saw some good things with Jaden Jones. It wasn't necessarily just one player that was a game wrecker for Florida State, but I saw 8 to 10 really, really quality football players that were getting after the passer. And I'll say this, a bunch of these Florida State guys were whooping tail against Caden Proctor, who has a chance to be a top 10 NFL draft pick in the next couple of months. One of the biggest questions we had for Florida State was, who's your difference maker up front? And who's the guy that can really go and wreck games for this Florida State defense, specifically in the pass rush? I don't know if there's one guy necessarily that popped more than anybody else, but I saw 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that were contributing in the pass rush. And again, credit to Tony White, because you look at this and say, outside of Darrell Jackson, it's a little bit of a smaller defensive line. All right, let's play to their strengths. Let's do a lot of stunts. Let's run a lot of games up front. We have the athleticism to move guys around and do a lot of different things with rushing our front four. And I thought Tony White did that plenty in this football game. Got a lot of guys that can play on this defensive line. And here's the storyline for Florida State. Like, can James Williams take that step? Jason Jenkins take that step? The Desir brothers take that step? Darrell Jackson take that step? I think there's a step to be taken for some of these guys on the defensive line. Which one does that, becomes a top 50 NFL draft pick? That's how this team, I should say, becomes a little bit more dangerous. Run game, we kind of talked about it. This run game it's electric to watch. And I'll say this about Usman Kroma. He's going to be the running back one sooner rather than later for Florida State. And I think there was probably some apprehension to give this kid 20-plus carries in a football game. And I get that. And look, Royda Williams, who I think is dinged up, I thought he played very well. Gavin Sawchuk, I thought played very well too. Tony White is leaning into all the ways this offense can run the football. Whether it's Jalen Lucas, whether it's Mekhi Danzy, whether it's the running backs, whether it's Tommy Castellanos, when you have the ability to run the football in so many different ways, you become really hard to defend. That's kind of where Florida State is, because they have those guys that can win on the perimeter. Mekhi Danzy, Jalen Lucas. They have the guys that can run between the tackles. You have a quarterback that can pretty much just be a difference maker wherever you want to use him in the run game. And then also thought the wide receivers and tight ends were blocking their tails off too. And so that's another thing that's going to be important to Gus Malzahn's running offense, because we want to do a lot of stuff to the perimeter. That's where we want to be explosive. Well, you can only be explosive a guy like Deuce Robinson, who only had 2 catches for 18 yards. I think he had a drop. Maybe not a super difference maker in the passing attack for Florida State. The dude was blocking his tail off, and that, again, speaking to the difference in culture. Last year, if you had a former 5-star wide receiver that wasn't getting a ton of opportunity, I bet you that wide receiver wasn't blocking his tail off down the field. The Florida State wide receivers were. And then here's the last thing. I really, although Florida State did not really have to lean on the passing attack much in this football game, I came away saying, hey, Tommy can make the throws he needs to make to be two-dimensional on offense. When you dial it up and get square away winning on the outside against man coverage, Tommy Castellanos threw a great football. When you scheme Jalen Lucas wide open on that wheel route up the sideline, Tommy Castellanos hit him in stride. Thought he threw a really good ball up the seam to Javon Boggs, and from what we've heard in fall camp, Javon Boggs normally ain't dropping those. Thought that was a really good football as well. Didn't really put the ball in harm's way at all in this football game. I mean, Tommy's arm was not the story of this football game. Thought the throws that the times Gus Malzahn asked Tommy to make those throws, thought he made them at a really high level. Best players on the field. To me, it was Earl Little. What was number one? Thought Tommy Castellanos was awesome at quarterback. The Desir brothers. Hey, how about a guy we haven't talked about yet? Danny Lyons. Thought he was really solid, disruptive in the pass rush, holding up some double teams in the run game. We had question marks. Hey, outside of Daryl Jackson, when we're going to that out front and we're playing with the nose, like who else can do that outside of Daryl Jackson? That I had a legit question about that. Thought Daniel Lyons did that job, and it should only get easier as you get Kevin Wynn back healthy, because I think Kevin Wynn will be able to do that too. Man, you saw a lot with this. There was not a program that we had more question marks about going into 2025, and there was not a program that answered the amount of questions that Florida State did. That was a lot. Kind of emptied the notebook at you guys, but after rewatching this game a couple of times, like, there were things that we had to talk about. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. To the Florida State fans, appreciate it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.